to two. Thank you. As we drew to a close last night, Dick and I shared with you how both alcohol and untreated alcoholism brought us to our knees. And we talked at some length over the course of the evening about what it meant to me, what being a real alcoholic looked like to me, and to Dick. And I look back on it now, today, and I can recognize the hand of God moving and working in my life. And I can recognize the moments what God gave me a clear message, a clear thought. And I can look back and realize when in the spring of 1983, when I looked at my father in the intensive care ward of the VA and looked at him curled up in the fetal position in yellow, and he didn't die at that particular occasion, by the way, but on his deathbed, so to speak. I can look back at it today, and I can recognize that God showed me a vision of where my alcoholism was taking me, and God showed me the horror and the grief involved in alcoholism and how it affects all of our lives. And God showed me and demonstrated my powerlessness over his alcoholism and my own at that time. And I can look back today and see the Spirit and how it moved me and what it did in my life at that point, in that moment, and how I needed to see the horror of the disease. And I can look back today and see how in my untreated alcoholism, as I reached the end of untreated alcoholism, and how I knew and I saw and I recognized that there was a hole in me the size of a tractor-trailer truck, that something was deeply missing in me as I struggled with sobriety and no recovery. And as I struggled towards the end, from one Alcoholics Anonymous meeting to another, and one attempt to find some recovery to another, how the Spirit moved me to seek the change and to keep looking and to know that something was wrong. And I see that today as the hand of God touching me and touching my life and motivating me, and pain motivating me and bringing me to the table of recovery, so to speak. And it brought me to Jerry's house on a Monday evening in June of 1994 in utter desperation, and at the end again, at the end again. And it was at the end again in, as we talked about, in untreated alcoholism, in sobriety, as opposed to the desperation of being an active alcoholic. Today I can talk about the Spirit and recognize and understand the Spirit at work in me, and to recognize that the great reality lies deep within. And I can look inside to see God. And I can look inside of you to see God. And to recognize God working in all of our lives. It didn't come that easily. Back in 1994 when I stumbled into Jerry's living room and Dick and Dana were there, I knew that the truth was in the room. I knew that Jerry had something desperately that I needed and I wanted, and I knew that these guys, Ben and Dana and Dick, were finding it. And we're moving in the direction of real recovery. I didn't know what real recovery was quite yet, but I knew that they had it. And I knew that I wanted what they had. So the question was, what did I have to do to get it? And how did they get it? And with that...
Morning, everybody. Hope everybody slept well. I did. Along the lines of what Malcom was talking about, I was thinking about my own experiences really before I even got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and how he said that, it took everything that it took, and it took the time that it took for me to get here, and find my own bottom. I like to use the analogy that if you're 30 years old and you're 60 years old, like I am, you can't be 30 and have the experience of a 60-year-old. You can't do it. You can't go around it. And we all want to do that in early sobriety, but you've got to have all those experiences to be 60 years old. And that's what was involved in my journey, and probably in all of yours. Part of the story that I didn't tell last night was, kind of how I got in before I met that gentleman, Brian, who walked with me unselfishly for 6 months. It says in the book, and I'll paraphrase because I'm not a quoter, but it talks about us not knowing the point in time where we passed over the line and started drinking alcoholically. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, I used to think in the very beginning of this, or when I was a little newer at it after I did the work with Jerry, that that the progression was, and the line was somewhere up in my mid-30s. And as I've been around longer, what I realize is that I was 100% hopeless when I started to daily drink, and that was when I got married. The first week that I was married, I began daily drinking because that's what happened in my house. That's how I grew up. My parents always drank, and it talks in the book about the progression of the disease, and us getting to that point of unmanageability. If you think about in Bill's story, Bill had a long, rocky, sloppy road. How many of you ever seen the movie Bill's Story? Yeah, it's pretty graphic, isn't it? When you really look at, he was just a sloppy, falling down, just hard relapsing drunk, And like I said last night, the progression for us is different. But I know this. I was 100% hopeless when I started daily drinking, and I've moved that date back over the years, and things were beginning to happen in my behavior when I drank that looked different than normal. I was a thrower. I like to hurl things. I'm not proud of this. It's pretty comical today. Debbie's behind the post, so I can't see her face. But I was a hurler. You know, when I get a few drinks in me and things didn't go right, I pick up something and throw it. And the other thing that happened, I told this in my story a little bit, is you know, it was pretty violent. It really was. You know, I can make fun of it, but it was violent. I'm not proud of that. I used to punch doors and put holes in doors. And when we sold our first house, the realtor said to me, "Boy, you're really handy." Because what I would do is I would take the next day when I sobered up and I got over the hangover, I'd take the door and build a coat rack for it. And I got to be an expert at flipping the door around so that the punch mark was on the inside of the door. Then I could put the coat rack on it. She thought I was pretty handy. But that stuff started happening pretty quickly in my progression. So, you know, probably by age 28 or 29, I remember thinking to myself, I had a friend who I used to do a lot of drinking with, who's not an alcoholic. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, he took a left and I took a right. And my progression started to ramp from there. So by the time I was in my 30s, it was beginning to get pretty dicey. And you know, in contrast to that, I talked a little bit last night about some of the things that was going on. You know, remember in Bill's story, he says I was on the quest. I was driven, and I can relate to that 100%. Malcolm talked about it a little last night, trying to find a place where we fit and we're okay. And you know, being 100% driven for me looked like, okay, let me go and start a business. So I had an appliance repair business. I was a service tech. So at night I'd appliance repair, and then that grew into a commercial laundromat repair business. I got hooked up with another guy, and then I decided I've got to own a laundromat. I've just got to, and that's going to make me okay. I'm going to get a bigger car, and I'm going to drive around, and I'm going to be the big shot. And that's where the pinnacle, probably, of my drinking was. 1983 to 1985, and Debbie was working 3 or 4 days a week. I was working a full-time job at AMSCO, and I was also running a full-time business with 9 employees and 96 hours a week, 7 days a week, you know. And I'll tell you, the wheels were coming off, you know. It looked great on the outside, but it wasn't very good on the inside. In 1985, my wife's cousin Chris came to our house, and she was going to be the guest speaker at an Al-Anon roundup in Westboro. And Chris and I have always been close. She was in my wedding. She's 10 years younger than I am, and she's kind of like a sister figure to me. So I was telling her about my drinking, and we went out to lunch and had a few beers, and we were talking about my drinking. And I said, you know, I really think I have a problem. And she said, well, why don't you go to an AA meeting? I said, oh, that's a little severe, you know. So she took me to Westboro Sunday morning. And if you've ever been to Westboro Sunday morning, it's a pretty big meeting. And I went, I cried. Some biker was up there talking, and he was talking my deal. And then I said to myself, all right, you're 34 years old. I'm not ready to do this. So I went back out for another 6 years and did some more research. And finally, you know, that catches us up to where I was talking about last night. And what got me there was my father-in-law, Bernie Hennessy. I love him. I'll always love him. He was a crotchety man. He was one of us. And he died from this disease. And since I had been to that AA meeting in 1985, I became the resident expert of the family about AA. So I got called in to bring him to an AA meeting. He got in a jackpot up in Holton, Maine, and got hospitalized and detoxed. And they told him that he better go to an AA meeting. So I got the call to bring him. That's the grace of God right there. See, I had nothing to do with that. I just went back to Westboro Sunday morning, and Bernie didn't get it, and I did. And I don't know why. You ever think about that? Why are you here? Why are you here? And why is somebody else not here? And I've never figured that out, by the grace of God, I guess. And I have to think about that sometimes, because it doesn't always seem that way. But that's what happened. He stayed 3 weeks, and I kept coming. And that's how God began to touch me. I didn't know it at the time. I was so screwed up, like we all are. So we have to be 100% hopeless. It says that we're beyond human aid in the book. It talks about being beyond human aid. And what does that mean? That means that that nobody can help me. That it's me and God, me and the Spirit. That's it. How many times have you watched somebody close to you, maybe, if you're in Al-Anon, and they're sliding, and you want to fix them? It's a family disease. I've got a son that's affected by the disease, and I've got brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws, and it's all through our families. And the Al-Anon, my friend Janice always says, that there's an Al-Anon in every alcoholic, but not an alcoholic in every Al-Anon. And I think that's really true, because most of us grew up with this in some shape or form. So we've been affected by it. But so we're 100% hopeless, and we're apart. We're in the human condition, and the human condition can't fix us. So we have to find a power. We have to find a power. And the question is where is that power going to come from? And that really begins to lead us and allow us to think a little about step 2.
As a youngster, I got brought to church. I got brought to the Second Congregational Church in West Newton, Massachusetts, and my mother was determined that she was going to impart some kind of religious education in us. I rebelled as a child. I rebelled as a child against it to some degree. But I loved some of the pomp. I loved some of the sense of awe in the big, wonderful church. The Reverend Canon, though I wanted to get out of there when he had a sermon. And if as much as I didn't feel a part of something at home, I felt a little part of something in the youth groups at church. So through the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, I gravitated towards that. And once again, as I was saying earlier, I can recognize today that the spirit within me was awakened to some degree. It may have only been a quarter of an inch, but the spirit recognized the presence of God in the church for me, and the presence of God in the youth group and the people that worked with the youth groups. As I talked about last night, I took that left-hand turn when I was in the spring of my 9th grade, and I think it had something to do with the fact that I embarrassed myself to no extent over a girl in one of the youth groups. And of course, at 9th grade, what are you, 14 years old, 15 years old? And I never went back. I literally never went back. I embarrassed myself to the point that I couldn't show my face. And that was a great part of the left-hand turn that I took in 9th grade. And I struggled so hard with the need to be somebody, and I was nothing. I was absolutely nothing. In my mind, I was the lowest piece of whale turd, and the struggles went on from there. Alcohol became the answer only because at first it was I could be an adult. I had some image of myself being an adult and drinking like adults drink, and I could get out of myself. What this isolation did for me was more and more and more, it forced me to withdraw within myself. And the more we withdraw within ourselves, the more we become centered around oneself. And the more I became the center of my universe, and the less I became aware that there is a universe out there, that you had feelings or a role or a place. Everything revolved around me, my, I, need, this, that. And my connection with people and human beings other than myself was gone. 14, 15, 16 years old. By 16, 17 years old. And you were simply pieces on my chessboard. And my goal in life and what I did was simply to manipulate you to do what it is that I think I needed you to do. And as Dick began to talk about, I didn't have the needed power to do anything else. And this drive to be somebody was so overwhelming that I started out on a journey of one jackpot after another, one marriage after another, one child after another, one business after another, one location after another. And I won't bore you with the gory details, but my active alcoholism was from 18 and a half years old to 31, and it progressed unabated through that entire period of time. I didn't get a respite where things got a little better for a period of time and things looked a little better. It was just one business disaster after another and one circumstance after another. Some of you may know I was a daily beer drinker and got in a lot of trouble when I drank something more than beer. And I couldn't abide being silly and stupid in front of you. So I would begin to drink every day as soon as I socially could. The drive to be somebody was important, so the drive to be successful was on. So I wouldn't drink at work, and I wouldn't drink in a manner that I thought was interfering with my work, which obviously it was all along. But as soon as I socially could, as soon as I got out of work, I would begin drinking, and I would drink until I fell into bed at the end of that day. Or, if it was a party or a situation, or I drank something other than beer, and I wound up asleep in the back of a car, or asleep at somebody else's house, or just wasted and all done when I couldn't stand anymore. I only blacked out a half a dozen times that I can remember, probably. When I look back after I got sober. Even before I became recovered, I could see the progression of the disease over that decade. I could see how I had lost control over a period of time. And I talked about the church and my relationship with God because still today, I see great wonder in many of the much of the grandeur and much of the wonder of the edifices of the church and operations of the church, so to speak, and the buildings and the history. But I have never gone back. When I needed to find God, after I met Jerry and after I met Dick and Dana, and it became very clear that the power that I needed to draw on to find recovery lay in a power greater than me. Here I am. I've been around Alcoholics Anonymous for just about 11 years. I maybe done 100 meetings in the 11 years, and I've been hunting for the answer in the last 2 of those 11 years. And the steps have been on the wall, and I've heard 100 different speakers, and I have never come to understand what a power greater than me really meant, what it meant. It was still a concept to me. It was still an idea. It was still the God of the church. It was still something that you could believe in and something that you understood, but I didn't understand. I didn't get it. I didn't get it at all. And as Jerry started to read that time around, and by now we were over at Dick's house, and we got into We Agnostics, and I'm going to pick the book up and just read a paragraph for you, because it was the switch that allowed me to understand, that allowed me to formulate and begin to understand a concept of a power greater than me that I could live with, that could be a part of my life. And I have this big book up here that has big print, and I still put my glasses on. I still need to. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact with Him. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. We found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek Him. To us, the realm of the Spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. It is open, we believe, to all men. You know, I heard those words, and Jerry read them, and we all talked about them, and we all talked about them at great length when we were in We Agnostics. And I began to understand and believe that maybe there was a creative intelligence underlying the totality of all things. I couldn't look at a beautiful sunrise and not see the presence of some sense of intelligence, some power. I couldn't look at a starlit night and understand that I'm looking at a star and the light that's reaching my eyes emanated from that star 1,200 years ago, and not think that there wasn't some guiding influence in this universe. And that was as far as I could take it. I still couldn't take it yet to being the world of the Spirit. And I still couldn't take it to the point where the great reality was deep within. But the seed had been planted. The door had been opened. And I could begin to understand that, well, okay, there is a power. There is a power greater than me, of some kind of power, some sense of creative intelligence, some concept of God. I began to understand that my answer lay within that. My answer lay within that. And my answer lay within finding a way to draw upon that power, to understand that power. I couldn't get my head around it, but all that was necessary for me to make a start was to believe that it was. That it was.
One of the things that was of great help to me was when we read we agnostics for the first time was to get a definition of what agnostic means. And the definition that was given to me by Jerry is that an agnostic is somebody that believes in something or believes in God, but doesn't believe that God works for them. And that was like a light switch for me. Just to take you back in my experience, I grew up in Natick, Massachusetts, and like I told you the other night, I'm an adopted only child, and my parents weren't churchgoers. They took a few stabs at it in the Protestant church. I remember we joined the Methodist church, and they went a few times, and I remember the excuse was that the pews hurt my father's back. So I didn't go to Sunday school for very long. I really believe that we're all searching for the Spirit. If we're alcoholic or Al-Anon or addict, I think the Spirit is lacking in our lives. My friend Chuck C. uses this analogy about the Spirit, or this little example of the Spirit, and he uses a window as the Spirit. So, if you think of a window and you think of the window and you look out the window this morning, the sunlight is out there. If you had a shade on the window, when you pulled the window down, that would be ego. And ego is what blocks us from the Spirit. So if my ego's in play, if self is in play, I can't have the Spirit. The two can't reside simultaneously. If I lift up the shade, the light is still there. The Spirit's still there. And that's really a metaphor for my whole life. If I look at it, the Spirit was always there. And I was searching for it somewhat, but it was blocked by that ego and by that self. When we go on in this, one of the things that the book states is that, we are in a disease of self. That's really the root cause of this whole thing. It's not a disease of alcoholism in a drinking sense. It's a disease of self. So I was always searching for the Spirit. Jerry one time used the idea of the Spirit, in booze. We finally found that Spirit. I think Don talked about that a little bit. So I grew up, like most of us did in the greater Boston area, amongst a lot of Catholics. And I always was a little marveled at that religion, because a lot of my friends were Catholic, and I would go to church with them sometimes, and it was appealing to me. But I, like Malcolm said, I was never really a part of anything. And then I met a girl, and this girl happened to be, her family was deeply religious, and she involved me in the Catholic religion. And I used to think to myself, well, you converted to be closer to God. I really converted for the girl. I worked as a young man in Wellesley, and right down the street, this is Weston Road in Wellesley, was St. James. That's the parish that they've been barricaded in the building now for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, trying to close that church. 2,300 days. And Monsignor Sullivan used to come in the gas station, and so I got friendly with him. And when I decided to convert, I asked him if he would sit with me, and he did. And I was about to go in the service for my active duty. This is 1970, and so the rush was on to get me baptized. And so I was baptized a Catholic in March of 1970, and went away, and came back, and went to church a little bit, and then stopped going to church. And then I met and married Debbie, and we got married in the Catholic Church. And something was still lacking. I would go in, and I would still feel apart from. See, I believe that what the world teaches us is that we have to be good. And I couldn't be good. See, I couldn't ever measure up to where that bar was, where the church told me that I needed to be. And of course, with my alcoholic mind, I would take that, whatever they said, and make it about me, because I was self-centered. And so I could never be good. So to stay in the church and to stay active, as my kids got older, we moved to Milford. We joined the parish Sacred Heart. It was the Italian parish in Milford. I was probably the only non-Italian there. Not really, but they would ask me, well, who do you belong to? You know, with a last name like Hall, I mean, you know, there was no doubt that I didn't fit in very well at Sacred Heart. But I decided to get active, that I'd become a lector and a Eucharistic minister, and so I took the lessons and I started that in about 1981. So that correlates with the ramp up of my drinking. And every other Sunday I would go, and, you know, if you've been to Mass, you know, I'd read the first two readings, usually severely hungover, you know, red-faced. And I did that for 18 years. And that separation began to grow and grow. I came here, and then we began to go through the book, and we got to this spot, and I began to take a look at that. And Malcolm read from the book, you know, if we can just get that door open a crack, maybe we can find the God or the spirit of our understanding. And so what happened in my experience was that I got another God of my understanding. I kind of had two gods, the one in church and the one that I found here. The one that I found here somehow didn't allow me or make me have to be good. He would just take me as I am. And great things started to happen from that. You know, it was a difference. I had never felt the way I felt before about the Spirit. And I think when we're at that spot, at least for me, what began to happen was I would go out to places and try to find Him. And where I would find Him most often would be somewhere outside. So we had, you know, some different places that I would go, and maybe put on some music in the car and go up in Sherburne or Dover on the road somewhere and park by a field and get quiet. See, I really believe that by nature we just can't get quiet. We just can't get quiet. I can see some of you up and down, up and down. It's okay. It's okay. I was there too. I could never just be. My wife has a prayer. It says, "Be still and know that I am God." It's a psalm. Can I just be? That's a big deal. That's a big deal. As alcoholics and addicts and Al-Anons, you know, we have busy minds. And can we get to that spot where we can just, everything can calm down? That's what I was looking for in the drink. You know, I'd take the drink, like I said last night, I'd get that sense of ease and comfort, and everything would just start to calm down. And I could be for just a little while. You know, in my alcoholism, I remember even after I got sober, I remember saying to some guy in AA, you know, how do I slow this thing down? I've got like 50 projects going on in my house. That was my way of not having to feel anything, you know? And, you know, everybody thought it was great. They looked, Dick, look at your lawn. You know, I'd be out there. You know, I'd have a hole dug for a dry well. I'd be mowing my front lawn and edging it. I mean, I was a lunatic. Everything looked great, though. Perfect. You know. So can we just be? That's where we need to. That's what we need to try to get here, you know, is just to get in that spot where we can get everything to calm down. I'll bet you there's some of you sitting out there that just want that so badly. And it's possible. It's possible. And you can talk to, if you're not there, you can talk to a lot of people here that are there. And they can help you try to get there. So that's what it began to look like for me. I could go to a place and experience something that I had never experienced before. The years went on, and I began to find a greater and greater disparity with my Catholic church. And don't hear that I have a problem with the Catholic Church. I think it's a beautiful, wonderful religion. But I couldn't reconcile with what I had here and what I had there. The two didn't fit, because what I was hearing there was the bad good deal. This is just for me, okay? I'm not talking about your Catholic Church. I'm talking about my Catholic Church. And so I was always afraid to leave. In January of 1998, which is about 4 years after I did the work, I made up my mind that I was going to go. And the worry that I always had was that if I left the Catholic Church, A, that I wasn't going to go to heaven, and B, that I wasn't going to get a good Christian burial. If you've ever been to a Catholic high mass, you'll know that you get the water and you get the smoke on the chain, and I wasn't willing to give that up for a long time. All that pomp and circumstance. Now burn me and throw me at Nubble Light and I'll be okay. Honestly, that's where I want to go. Somewhere where I can be. See, where I can be at peace, just like I am mostly here. Mostly, I say. So, that's what I found. And then some more time went by. And again, this is just my experience. And I found a son that was gripped by this disease and gonna die. And we put him on a plane in January, or in December rather, the day after Thanksgiving in 2004. And God works in other ways. And I kept hearing about this church. Different people for 3 or 4 years were telling me about this place to go. And so we said, let's give it a whirl. And I went, and that night another God thing happened. And I've been connected with that for 7 years now. And it's the most wonderful place, because it gives me the same fellowship and love and everything that this program gives me. Now, that's just my experience. You've got to have your own experience, whatever that is. But I think the takeaway here would be to remember maybe what Malcom said 10 minutes ago, and that is, if we can just be open-minded and get the door open a crack, the Spirit will come to us. And He always does. And, we talked last night about, if you weren't here, we talked about having a new experience. We talked about having an experience free from prejudice. And so maybe we could take that thought, that idea, and have a new experience with this God of our understanding. It's okay. We can do it. We can do it.
I'm going to open the floor a little bit in a couple of moments, and I'm going to ask Kevin maybe back there to be the keeper of the microphone, the other microphone there, and wander around and perhaps get a few of your comments and your experiences with your God. And I just want to say that the presence of the Spirit in what we do, and the presence of the Spirit in within all of us today, is the greatest miracle of my life. That I see it in all of you, that it touches me in so many ways. As with Dick, we need to clear away the ground a little bit to understand and be touched by that Spirit. For many of us, the question of God and the question of a higher power is an intellectual exercise. And it is a belief, and perhaps even a faith. And a member of our group here mentioned to us once that the difference between religious people and alcoholics is that we need to engage God. That we need to engage God. That faith alone is not enough. That faith alone is not enough. So, does anybody have anything to share, and perhaps can share some experiences with us? Hang on a moment for the microphone here.
Hello, good morning. I'm Michelle, an alcoholic and an addict. A real alcoholic. I'd like to share something that has brought me very, very close to the God of my understanding. I'll try to make it brief. My tears are happy tears, grateful tears. The past 4 years have been absolutely a huge growing and learning experience for me. Briefly, I've been fighting for my own life with cancer. I am now in remission for 6 months. In the midst of all this, my mom passed away. But what a blessing, because my highest spirit was telling me to go see my mom in Florida. I was real sick. They helped me out in the airport. Mom and Dad greeted me when I got to Florida. I wasn't feeling well. I tried my best to pretend. I had to sleep for a few days, and when I came about, I was feeling better. And right in front of us, there was the beach and the ocean where I grew up with my family in the summers. And my mom wasn't doing too well. She was losing her mobility and diagnosed with early Alzheimer's, which was just starting to happen. And when I went home, before I left, I was able to tell my mom and dad how much I loved them and that I would be there for them no matter what, like they were for me. I went home, and a week later, my mom passed away. She drowned in the water. She lost her mobility, and the current took her down. So I went through my process of grieving. I came to the understanding that I was grateful. My mother went quickly. She passed. She went, and the favorite place in the whole world that she loved was the ocean. And I was able to see her just a few days before that and known that she had forgiven me. And what a blessing that was. And I returned there back. I'd just come home January 29th with my dad. And I just absolutely felt the spirit within me with complete peace and serenity. Complete. And I got through it all without a drink. No matter what happens, you do not need to pick up that first drink. And that's my message. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom. I'm an alcoholic. Dick and Malcom, thank you so much for your service. It's really great to hear you. And, for me, my journey was in my late teens, early 20s. I was looking for the right religion. And when I found it, I was living in Vegas, and the different born-agains and Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses were knocking on the door, and I would just invite them in and have the opportunity to argue for a few hours, and something I really enjoyed. And I chose to join one of those religions, and it didn't solve my problems. I had problems with rage and depression, and I decided that it was better to drink and drug than it was to because religion wasn't working for me. So when I got to AA, I really had to simplify and just in the morning kind of do the knee bump where you hit the ground and say, God, please keep me sober, and then jump up or run to work. And at the end of the day, thank you, God, for keeping me sober. Jump up, jump into bed. And once I started doing the work, I realized I really needed to spend time with God and really spend time in prayer and quieting my mind, and that God was no longer the fairy godmother or the genie that you make wishes to, and so I realized so many of my things that I wished for, I thought I was praying for them, but really they were wishing, they came true, but I couldn't hold on to them, and they really, a lot of times when I didn't really even, I knew what I wanted, but it really wasn't what I needed. But today I see miracles in my life. I have a 60-year-old older half brother who I didn't grow up with, but I used to party with him when I was in my 20s. And about 15 years ago, I lost touch with him. He's a crack addict and alcoholic, and I would continue to send him Christmas cards, and I'd say, please call. He wouldn't return my calls, or the phone numbers were never any good. And I'd say, call me if you get a chance, and I'd leave my phone number on the Christmas cards. And I didn't hear from him, like I said, for 15 years. And all of a sudden, about a year and a half ago, I get a call from a total stranger. And so a woman who's a friend of hers saying, we found the Christmas cards, and we didn't even know he had family, but we found your phone number. And fortunately, I had moved a few times, but always in the same neighborhood, so my phone number had stayed the same. And, found out he was dying of cancer, and I was able to reconnect with them. And fortunately, he's living longer than they thought, but I've been able to reestablish a relationship I couldn't, before this, and it was just, God put together really the impossible, because I could never have done that. And this woman was like an angel, doing God's work, for that moment, bringing us together. And, today I go down and visit him a few times a year. He's in a nursing home, as a result of his alcoholism. He has a tracheotomy and a feeding tube, and he's never, at 60 years old, he's never leaving that nursing home. But, I'm very, very blessed to be able to at least have a relationship with them. And that, that's really, truly a miracle. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Let's come down here to Danny.
Well, this is my NFL profession.
Sunday night, I'm an alcoholic, and my name's Danny. And when Dick was sharing about his definition of agnostic, that fits me exactly. Because I always believed in God, and I was born Catholic. I'm a Catholic to speak of today. I don't practice it, but what hits me with that is that I always believed that there was a God, but God wasn't for me. He worked for like my grandmother and my mother and the people who it worked for. It didn't work for me. But until I came to a place in my life where life didn't work. Alcohol didn't work anymore. Life, and I just was at the place where I didn't know where to turn anymore. Like my friend Bob says, I ran out of ideas. I had no more wiggle room. I couldn't wiggle. I couldn't maneuver, duck, dodge, or anything. And I found myself at a place where I just had to do what was in front of me. There was nothing else there. And I started taking action, on that belief. And then when I take that action, I ended up with faith. I never had faith. I thought belief and faith was the same thing. And today I know that it's not. I can believe in something, but I have no faith in it because I have no experience with it. And today I have faith in this process and what we're doing here, for the simple fact that I took the action, and here we sit. You know what I mean? Another year together, and we're just so for me it's just a matter of just like it says, being willing to believe, and my higher power, who I choose to call God, is the only constant is that God is there, and that as long as He's running the show, I'm okay. But as far as my conception and belief is changing. It's constantly evolving. I'm not where I was at yesterday, let alone last year. And I just wanted to share that, and just and I also want to say I was gonna wait to the end, but I just want to thank Malcolm and Dick and for, like, the dedication it takes to do this and put this together. You know what I mean? It's like serious, and these guys, I'm sitting here in awe of these guys because they both run their own businesses, and just the effort. As busy as I am, they're even busier, and they put this together, and I just want us all to just appreciate. I appreciate it anyways. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Danny. We're going to come down front here. In fact, why don't I just hand this microphone to you?
I'm an alcoholic and an addict. My name's Megan. I can't even believe I'm speaking right now, but I know in 15 minutes my mind is going to make me believe something else right now. So, as soon as you mentioned, I've always believed in God, but God in the world, not God for me. But I know that there's something there. But when you were talking about believing in something that can restore us to sanity and to make me better and feel better, the fear and anxiety was just overwhelming that came over me. And that's because of my self-centeredness, because of having control. I'm at the point right now where I believe I can make myself believe anything, and I truly believe it. When I pray, I don't even say what I've done. I say, yeah, God, you know what I did. And, I can't even say it out, in my head. And so I just felt like I had to say something, about this, because I'm scared. I'm scared to, not even giving myself over to, a power greater than myself, but even the thought of it scares me to let go of that control. So I just wanted to kind of tell on myself, because like I said, in 15 minutes I'd believe something else. So, thank you.
Paul, I'm an alcoholic. And I've been sitting here listening to you and thinking actually with something you said last night, Dick, was from the first session, why we were here. And what I've experienced is I was a chronic relapser like a lot of us. I came to AA for so many years, and within a short period of time, the obsession would come on me after trying so many other things other than the steps and trying to seek God, and I would drink, and that went on for so long that I really thought I was hopeless. And I know that's a common story in here, but that said, that's not the way it is today. I sought God through, like you said, desperation, and I've always had, like yourself, like what you said, I've had some belief. I heard other people, but I wasn't sure. But I was so desperate enough at that point that I really believed I would never, ever stay sober, and I was willing to try to seek. What's happened since then, and what I wanted to speak quickly on, was I feel like listening here today, thinking and everything, is how I limit myself. Today, that obsession is unbelievably, like, gone. It's gone. I don't have that, and that is, and I know many of us here know what I'm talking about. That's just amazing to me. I never thought that would leave. And it's been a short time relative to a lot of you people. I'm 2 years sober, but believe me, I mean, like a lot of us, I could never ever go this far, and so that's, I can't take credit for that. But what I struggle with today is some of that. I think I'm limiting myself, and I'm starting to recognize, sitting here, like you said last night, I can't fix myself, and I still think I fall victim to thinking that because I've been through this process, I have these steps in my life that I'll be able to fix these character defects, these thoughts that are in my head, my self-centeredness. Lately, over the last 6 to 8 months, I've been amazed at how still I can become resentful, and I'll go and pray for it and do what the book tells me to have it removed, and I think that I'm fixing myself, but I'm starting to recognize, like, I can't fix that, and I don't want to be limited to where I don't want to be content where I'm at. I am so blessed to be sober and have that obsession, but I'm not content where I'm at as a man and a spiritual being. There's still a lot of resentment and character defects in mine that I can be ashamed of, man, or that I want gone, because I can be victim to my thoughts a lot. And I think I've been falling into the belief that I'll fix myself by doing what the recipe says, as we call it in Wednesday Framingham. But I really can't. I have to start trying to learn how to tap into this spirit that is the only thing that's going to fix me. And I don't know. This is all uncharted territory, you know what I mean? But I think maybe a start is just recognizing that, like, humbling myself and saying, I can't fix myself, this information. I didn't take that obsession away. I did not take that obsession away, But that's all. Thank you.
I'm Cheryl. I came into rehab, and when I got there, I had been to the Sunday school, the Protestant church as a kid. I converted to Catholicism. I then looked into Judaism. I then went back into a Baptist church and had myself rebaptized. And I was trying so hard to have religion fix me, something fix me. And I believed in God. But as Dick said, not so much for me, because I didn't trust anyone or anything, and I really thought that it was only me that I could rely on. But I wanted the magic. I wanted the magic that I thought that religion would give me. I wanted what I saw other people have that were spiritual. But when I got to rehab and they talked about God, I said, oh, this is a lot of BS. What am I doing here? And I was sitting in this room with a bunch of people in the morning, and they would do this reflections kind of thing. And after a few days sitting there, I realized that God was talking to me through these other people, and that if I just listened, I just opened my mind, I started to hear things that were the answers to so many questions and so many problems that I had brought to God over the years, and expected to get a phone call from him and, saying, okay, this is what you do. But, since then, I have struggled, but at the same time, when I open my eyes, I have had some really amazing spiritual moments, and like a lot of people, to try and quiet my mind, I used to sit by the Charles River in Watertown on my way to work in the morning, and it was a spring morning, and I was watching the crew boats come down, and I was kind of looking off towards where the sun was hitting the river, and it looked like a bunch of diamonds on the water, and there was a single crew boat with one person in it rowing away from me into the sunlight. And it was like this unbelievable moment, because here was this person rowing backwards into the light, and as he went into the light, all I could see was his head in the shadow and the oars rowing in the water. And I realized that, if I just let my mind go and row, just row, stop thinking about where I'm going, how I'm going to get there, and what are the pitfalls along the way, I can get there. And I try to keep that in my mind when I get in my scary place with the busy mind. And lately, I shared last night, I've been isolating a lot. And, one of the things before I got into AA that I used to think about was that I used to feel like I was in a boat in the ocean, out of sight of any land, without any oars, without a sail, and just like so alone and so hopeless. And I realized that when I stay with the fellowship and I do this work, I'm on the dry land and I'm with my family. And when I choose isolation, what I'm doing is I'm rowing my own boat back into the ocean, and I'm throwing the oars overboard. And somehow, by the grace of God, he comes back, he drops some more oars into my boat and says, come on, silly, come with me. And here I am, and I'm real grateful to be here. Thanks.
I'm an alcoholic. Used to be of the hopeless variety, but no more. When the first step became apparent to me, I realized that I was absolutely alone, divided from everything and everybody, and I was going to die. and I saw that I was going to die the alcoholic death, which my ego couldn't take. And at that point, I couldn't do anything about it. At that point, for the first time in my life, I became willing to believe that there might be a power greater than me. Up until that point, I was still running on my own conceptions, my own ideas. Until they ran out, until they burst, I was not willing. And when I became willing to believe in a power greater than myself, the door opened. I could do something next. I could go on to the next step. Before I was ever willing, I couldn't do anything else. And then as I moved on through this process, I discovered that the hindrances to me having a relationship with that power, which I do not call God, were in me, and I could not do anything about them. If I could identify them, and then I just have to find out if there's some way for me to release them. And now it is a number of years later, and there's a power greater than me that is at work in my life. And when I am conscious of the presence of God, I act differently. And that power is not, I always thought of a power as being something big and dramatic and earth-shattering, and to me it's been quiet. And the power, instead of coming after the quiet, it allowed me to be quiet. Before the power was at work in me, I was on my own. I was alone again. Once the power started working in me, then I could become quiet. And then something new could occur. I could see differently than I saw before. And I kind of like it. So I figure I'll keep doing it.
Thanks a lot. We got Mike back here in the corner.
Mike, alcoholic. Thank you, Bob. You said something that I was going to say too. I think what's amazing about the way life is today is that I can sit back and just and my mind does get quiet, and I can just be, and I can just be okay, regardless of what's going on. I can get those moments of peace and serenity that I sought my whole life. And Bob, you also said it too. Like, it just started with some willingness, and then Danny said the thing that rings in my head all the time is belief plus action equals faith. And that was my experience. I had some belief in something. I always had a belief in something. Like it says, I believed if I put the plug in the socket, the light would turn on. So I had belief in things I couldn't see. But I was unwilling to take the action. So when I got that willingness and then took some action, that's when it happened. And what you said, Dick, really clarified something in my mind too. And it was something again that my sponsor would tell me about, the lamplighter going through London, lighting the lamps. And if you look back, and it's nighttime, and you look back, you can see where he's been. And Danny shared some experience with me, how he looked and looked at those moments, and he could see God was working all along. And the way you described it as, I pull down the shade and I block the light, and that's my ego, and I lift up the shade and the light's still there. So light was always there. It was me in the middle of it. So thanks.
My name is Tony, and I'm an alcoholic. And you asked us last night what do we expect? And I'm sitting here, and I'm like this. I'm feeling shaky, and it's like the first time for some reason. What comes to me is that I'm here to connect to what's really important. We go out in the world, and we go to work, and we're doing the family thing, and we're doing our obligations, and that's important, but it's not that important. What's important is for me to stay connected and stay aware, because I'll go to work every day, and I have to do the best job possible, and that's important. No, it's not. it's not important, because without my connection, there is no job, there is no family, there's no husband, there's no kids, there's nothing, and I'm alone again. And you were saying something about the church and the pomp, and I was thinking, it came to my memory of when I was little, and I've always felt alone and different and outside. And a memory came to my mind of me and my cousin, and we must have been about 7, 8, and I remember I had this plastic bear head, and I was mashing up incense in the bear head and adding water, and I told her if she drank this, she could be as powerful as me. Okay, that's my ego, I guess, right? And then I was remembering when my grandmother, who's not in AA, but I think was a very spiritual person, and I was in the throes of my addiction, and I was just a mess, and she told me to you got to reach out to God, you got to talk to God, you have to have a relationship with God, because there's going to be a time when there's no human available to you. And all I kept thinking was, I can't, I'm not like her, I'm not good like her, I'm bad. And I had God so far up here that there's no way I could approach him. And when I got here, and you all were telling me to find a God that was personal to me, I couldn't understand that. So I had to take this idea and this label off of who I thought God was and bring him down to me. And people that know me know the things I had to go through. Like, first he was my teacher, because I was learning so much here. Just, little things to make the approach. And, he got promotions along the way. He was my teacher, then he was my supervisor, and then he was the owner of the company. Then he was my father, then he was my husband. So that helped it to grow, because I took that label and that idea of what I thought he was and who he was. I noticed that when I get crazy, it's because I'm disconnecting, because I'm letting the world in. And me as an alcoholic, I can't do that. I never fit in the world in the first place, even as a child before the alcohol and drugs. So how do I think I can fit in now? I can't. So I think for me coming here this weekend, and it's right on time as it always is that I need to put the focus on what's important here. What's truly important, and that's me finding. I found God. I just sometimes, okay, I'm clean, I'm sober, life is good. I gotta do the best job at work possible, No, I have to stay connected, and that's where I think we all run into trouble, because we disconnect. I disconnect. And God is so good, he doesn't let me go too far off the beam. But thank you guys for your service.
Hi everybody, I'm Mary, I'm an alcoholic. And I'm loud. Closer? Okay, sorry about that. I want to thank both Malcolm and Dickie for getting us started and sharing. You guys are doing a great job. But one of the things Dickie said that really struck me is that as an alcoholic, I need to engage God. And for me, a big part of my story is when I came into AA, my very first AA meeting, I knew nothing about AA or even what it meant to be alcoholic, but my very first meeting was the Thursday night Big Book meeting. So I was handed this solution. Here is your solution. And I couldn't get it. And I was like, why can't I get it? because I wasn't willing. I had a lot of the things that you were talking about. But when I did get it is when I engaged God. And for me, I find that faith, for me, just doesn't come. I have to prove my faith all the time. It's that faith without works is dead. And for me, I always have to be engaging it. So in the beginning, when I got here, I was told I had to believe in a power greater than myself. And I couldn't do that because you told me to do that. I had to do it because I had no other choice. I had to get there. And it was a long journey. But once I got there and I came to believe, then I had faith. And so for me, my story is a lot of, I tried to understand the steps so that I could experience them. And what I found is I have to experience them so that I can understand them. And it's just exactly how my mind works. It's the exact opposite. So I always find that my faith comes stronger when I solidify it with some type of experience. It's through the experience that my faith grows. Because I can't just have faith. I'm a doubting Thomas. I can't just have faith. I have to prove it. Give me proof. And it's only through my experiencing God working in my life with me that I have faith. So that's it.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everybody. I think that rather than take 10 minutes to share some closing thoughts on this subject with you, we'll pick it up at the beginning of the next session because we've been here a little while and everybody's ready for a pee and a cigarette and a cup of coffee. So how about we come back here about 20 of, and why don't we pick it up there, and Dick and I will share some thoughts on all of your awesome comments. Thanks, everybody.